Hey guys, it's Lainey, and today I'm going to be showing you guys what I've read for February and March. It was halfway through March when I realized I never filmed a February what I read. I decided to just combine them at the end of the month. So that's what I did, and I have about 20 books to show you guys. Might as well just jump right in. Right at the beginning of February was the Rainbow-thon, and I've already done a Rainbow-thon wrap-up for this, so I'm not really going to talk about these books in depth, but I will be linking down below my Rainbow-thon wrap-up. Surprisingly, I have reviews up for all three of these books that I read during Rainbow-thon, which was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, which I rated a 3, The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Hall, which I rated a 4.5, and Rebel of the Sands by Elwyn Hamilton, which I rated a 2.5. So my wrap-up for Rainbow-thon as well as each individual review is going to be down below. I should also mention that they are non-spoiler book reviews, so you can watch them and not get spoiled. The next book I read was Salt of the Sea by Rita Sepetys. I really love this book. This was a surprising book because I didn't think I would like it. I also have a non-spoiler book review for this book on my channel, which I'll link down below. I'm still trying to find that urban fantasy series that I love just as much as the Shifter series by Rachel Vincent, as well as the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. And I tried to read another urban fantasy book. I read Halfway to the Grave by Janine Frost, and I did not like it. I rated it a 2 out of 5. I just didn't like it. I thought it was really boring, and I did not like the romance in this book. This book also did my #1 biggest pet peeve in relationship building in books is when you summarize the two characters' relationships over a huge amount of time, and I hate that. It's like I immediately get turned off from the entire book when you do that. The next book I read was Map of Fates by Maggie Hall. As you guys know, I loved this book. I've talked about it a few times now on recent videos. This one was a 5-star rating for me, which was like my second 5-star rating of the year, which is surprising because I tend to like a lot of what I read. This one I thought was a lot better constructed, and the story expanded so much more than the first book. Not that I didn't like the first book, because obviously I did. I just really liked the direction of where the story was going. Also, the relationships in this book were pretty awesome, and I really loved the main character in this book, where I felt like she was a little bit lacking in the first book. She made up for it in this book, so I really recommend this series. It's one of my new favorite series I started this year. Okay, so then I read probably the saddest book I'll read all year, and that was Forbidden by Tabitha Suzma, I think. I think this is a book that everybody kind of knows what it's about. Whether you've read it or not, I feel like it's one of those books you kind of know. It feels weird saying it's a love story, but it is a love story between a teenage brother and sister, so it is an incestuous relationship. I've heard about this book literally when I started BookTube, but I had it on my wish list for a really long time, but I never bought it, and it wasn't because of the subject matter. Surprisingly, it was the price, because the Kindle edition never went down, I swear, the entire time it's been on my wish list, and it's been on my wish list for 2 years. Recently, I'm doing this thing with Kindle books, probably shouldn't be saying this, where I buy them, I read them in a week, and I'll return them if they're expensive, because I do not agree with Kindle books being so expensive. Like, it defeats the purpose of getting an ebook if it's almost as much as a physical book. Disclaimer, that is my issues with ebooks right now. So, I decided to do that. So I bought the ebook for $8.99, later returned it. However, this book, I realized I couldn't do a non-spoiler book review for it, which I planned on doing when I started it, because it'd be me sobbing the entire time. Even right now, I'm getting tears in my eyes just thinking about how completely heartbreaking this book was. And if you read it and you liked it, we're on the same wavelength. I understand now why people love this book so much. The subject matter alone, I'd never ever thought I'd say I loved a book about a brother and sister falling in love. I can say that now. It was absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful, and the characters were everything I liked in characters. It's one of those books I feel like you can't convey to people who haven't read it how much you love it, because they don't understand until they read it. I was one of those people. I didn't understand why people loved this book so much until I read it, and then it's like I understood. I was in the secret club of loving this book with everybody else that has read it. Subject matter like this doesn't bother me per se. I can typically read anything and not be offended by it or put off by it. If you're kind of like that and you haven't read this book yet, I really suggest and recommend trying this book out because it's so different than anything you'll read. The funny thing is, I finished reading this book during work. I was on my break and I was like, I'm just gonna finish reading it. Big mistake to finish this book in public because I started sobbing at my desk. And then when my break was over, I was still thinking about it and still tearing up, and I'm like, Lainey, you gotta pull it together. So this was like the biggest reaction to a book I feel like I've had in a really long time. And while it did break me, I still really enjoyed the reading experience of it. I also finished it in like a day and a half. It just, you just want to keep reading because you're just so interested. Yes. So that basically was a review. Should I talk about that book for like 5 minutes? I don't know. The next book I read was a reread, and that was The Swan and the Jackal by J. Abramsky. If you guys have been on my channel for a while, you know that this is the third book in the Company of Killers series. I'm rereading it with a bunch of other people on Goodreads, as well as Riley. I really like this one because I feel like it's more of a psychological thriller than the other books, so I really liked that about this book. And I really can't say much about it because it is a third book in a series. Even if it explores a different character, I'll just leave it at that. So if you don't follow me at Goodreads, this might be a surprise of the next books-ish I read. I read the first 7 volumes of the Sailor Moon graphic novels. I haven't edited this video yet, but I went back to my parents' house about a month ago. I did film a nostalgic haul of like a bunch of things that I used to like when I was a teenager, and I brought them back to my apartment with me. My Sailor Moon comics was one of them, and I was missing some of the earlier volumes, so I went on Amazon and I bought the first edition ones. Don't get too excited because they were super cheap. I grew up reading the 1998, 1997 translation comics of the manga, and so I wanted to keep with that instead of getting the newer ones that were released a couple years ago. I just binge read like the first 7 in like a few days. It's very easy to do. I am unable to rate them anything lower than a 5 because my younger self would be pissed if I read these critically. And there were some things that when I was reading, I'm like, especially the arcs, sometimes the arcs, and at least the beginning volumes, tended to be the same thing, just inserting different villains, which, I mean, when I was 7, it didn't bother me, but when I'm 24, kind of felt redundant. But these were such a big part of my childhood that I can't not rate them high. When I was reading some of the reviews on Goodreads, some people complain about the art. However, I love the art in the Sailor Moon comics. Like, you can't do wrong. They're my favorites. I love the art. So to quickly go through them, I read Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, and Volume 7. I'm currently reading Volume 8, taking my time reading that one. There's 11 volumes in like the first, I don't want to say season because that's not right, but like the first chunk, and then there's 4 books in the second chunk, and then there's 3 books in the last chunk. So gonna be reading those over the next couple months, so you'll be seeing the Sailor Moon comics for a while. Somewhere during my Sailor Moon reread, I read the worst book I've ever read in my entire life. And the fact is, I can't even say I finished it, and it was still the worst book I've ever read. This is my first DNF of the year. I literally could not get past 30%. It's the worst book I've ever read. And that was Ruthless People. Sadly, this was recommended to me because I like the In the Company of Killers series, so I decided to read this. I have the lengthiest, ranty Goodreads review that I'll link down below. Like, I can't even speak about it because it just, like, angers me so much. It was self-published, so that's why it is the way it is. I think no one told the author that, you know, maybe you should scale back on this, or maybe this isn't quite right. I also made the mistake to read it even though it's about the Italian mafia, and like I said before, since I'm so well versed in organized crime, I'm more critical when it comes to portraying organized crime in books. It was like all the stereotypes that you know of organized crime that are wrong that you put in a book. Another thing I wanted to complain about is that you guys know I love to cuss. I love a well-placed F word, but this book literally had the F word in every paragraph. Every paragraph. When I'm saying you have too many F words in a book, you have too many F words in a book. Not to mention the female character was the worst female character in the world. I hated being in her perspective. She was the absolute worst. She was the worst. She kills a pregnant woman, which in the first so many pages, and I was like honestly shocked. It takes so much for me to be shocked in a disgusted way in a book. I don't think I've ever been disgusted in a book before. I'm ranting and I don't care. I wanted to scale back on all the ranting this year, but oh my god. I usually don't rate books that I do not finish. However, this one was an exception because it was that terrible. Okay. Moving on. The next book I read was The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Corey. This is a standalone Aladdin retelling, which I rated a 4 out of 5. I really did enjoy it. Maybe now as I'm sitting here, maybe it's a 3.5 out of 5, 4 out of 5. I liked the first half more than I liked the second half, which is surprising because the second half had a lot more action in it. The writing is very, very beautiful, and it totally reminisced to, you know, the Arabian myths and everything, which I really enjoyed. Did film a book review on this. I'm hoping to get to the review for it because I've been really on top of my reviews as of late, if you haven't noticed. Coming from a huge Aladdin fan, like that's my favorite Disney movie, I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. And the last book I read of March was Ruined by Amy Tintero. This is an art copy. I actually won this in a giveaway hosted by the author, and I decided to read it right after I finished The Forbidden Wish. I'm like, I'm gonna read this right now. I love this book. I rated it a 4.5 out of 5. This book comes out May 3rd, so it's coming up pretty soon. I really recommend you guys get it. I already ordered my finished copy because I need this book. It tells a story of revenge. This unwanted princess is getting back at the kingdoms that wronged hers, and what pulled me in immediately about this book was within the first 5 pages, our main heroine kills another princess, and when she did that, I was like, I'm with you until the end. Like, I loved her from that onward, and it's told in dual perspective, which I really, really enjoyed, and I just really liked the world I was put in. It literally has everything I like in a YA fantasy was in this book, so I really, really enjoyed this. I really recommend it. That's all I have for you guys. That's 20 books. I hope you guys all have a really great day with some great books that you guys have read the past couple months. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!